And we welcome you to this special edition, Night Shift Live. It's better be special because it's really early in the morning and cold. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Kyle Nash and Bryson Turner. They both have woken me up because there's a UCF football schedule should be released any moment now. We know the opponents, but now we will now find out the live schedule. And Bryson's keeping an eye on it. And we could get breaking news here any moment. Any thoughts here, Bryson and Kyle, as we should be coming any second now with the schedule?
Well, the UCF Football Twitter account has just released a 2024 schedule release video on their account.
Of course, Kyle, everybody has to now have a video release with a acting performance to announce the schedule. Whatever happened to the days, Kyle, when we just release dates?
Listen, welcome to the social media world. I blame the former San Diego Chargers for this and what they do on their hype videos. That's what started all this, Eric Lopez.
Thank you. I love the former San Diego Chargers reference, by the way. Can we make that official? I think the NFL should name them the formerly San Diego Chargers and not call them what they really are. I like that.
The team, the Chargers formerly known as San Diego.
Yeah.
Like Prince. I get it.
Yeah.
So we can react. We could live react to the video if you want, because the Big 12 Twitter account has decided to be slow or hasn't uploaded yet.
Oh, there's Scott Adams on the video. He is a professional actor, as we know. I'm not even making that up. He's an actor on the side. So, of course, he's got to be on this schedule release. And then I believe that's all right, this is just a lot of better acting.
Yeah, I can fast forward it if you like.
Yeah, please fast forward. Kyle and I have things to do here.
The final frame. That's all we're trying to see is the final frame. Bro.
I just need to know. We need to know the date. Right, don't play that live. All right, we go. I got the schedule. Turn it off. Turn that off. We got it.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's just we got New Hampshire will be Thursday, August 29th. Saturday, September 7th, Sam Houston. We knew that the first Big 12 game for UCF will be in Fort Worth, Texas at TCU. Saturday, September the 14th. Saturday, September 21st will be a bye week for UCF. There will be 2 byes this year. Remember, it's a lengthier season this year, being a leap year in 2024. The first Big 12 home game for UCF will then take place Saturday, September 28th against Prime Time. Deion Sanders in Colorado. Let's go! Let's go! I'm flexing. Kyle, you and I are going to have some fun that night, my friend. And that better be a night game.
That is going to be a fun football game, Eric Lopez. Of this, I have no doubt.
October 5th, we know UCF at Florida. So Colorado and Florida, back-to-back weeks. Woo!
That is going to be the hypest week in UCF football history, or at least it's close to it. If you look at 2 football games back-to-back, I don't think we've had exciting. 2 hype of games as we're seeing right there with September 28th and October 5th, by the way, we have a bye. That means we also, if you look at the schedule, we also have a bye week on September 21st.
Yeah, bye week. Again, 2 bye weeks. Every team's going to have 2 bye weeks. UCF will then host Cincinnati, or as I like to call them now, the team that's the farm system for UCF that produces players for UCF in Florida. That'll be October 12th. At Ames, Iowa, October 19th. I think that's good news, guys. Real quick, Iowa State October versus November from a weather standpoint. I think that's good news. UCF hosts BYU October 26th, then hosts Arizona November 2nd. Go to Tempe on November 9th. I think you sign up for that, considering the weather. Bye week, November 16th. Ooh, at West Virginia, November 23rd. That's not going to be a fun weather day. And then they'll conclude with a Black Friday game. Black Friday, UCF back on Black Friday against Utah. Finally, for the first time in about 7 years, UCF will play a quality opponent on a Black Friday. How about that?
Shots fired, ladies and gentlemen.
There we go. So that's the schedule. That is official. It is out. We will have an article on blackandgoldbanneret.com.
Bing!
Thank you. All right, boys, that's the schedule. Give me my initial reaction, and I'll let you both react. Colorado, first Big 12 game. from a UCF standpoint, not ideal. I would prefer to play Colorado later in the season, only because I question Colorado's depth as the season went on. And we saw what happened last year. Colorado was good early in the year, not as good at the end. From a college football fan standpoint, that is going to be exciting. I think that's going to get a good TV slot. And then as Bryson alluded to, Colorado, Florida back-to-back is incredible. But I think if you're UCF, you got to be happy with this schedule. They are home. They're in the state of Florida. They only leave the state of Florida once between the start of the year and October 12th. That is incredible. I think it's critical they get off to a good start with that slate. All in all, not too bad. Kyle, your reaction?
Listen, I know people will comment on the weakness, air quotes, well, not air quotes, the relatively weak programs opening the year such as it is. But first of all, something old and something new is kind of a theme throughout this here. I allude to it, of course, in the release article that'll be up here on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube, or excuse me, webpage here very shortly, Bing. But the part where you come out, you have a new quarterback in KJ Jefferson, you're going to be breaking him in. All of that, I believe, makes a ton of sense to get that off the ground. And then after 2 games, not 3, but 2 games of build-up, you head into conference play, battling TCU. You get a road game in September. So there's not elements of a bunch of home games and no movement as we've seen in the past with UCF under Gus Malzahn. So I think it's a very strong open. I hate the Thursday nights, as probably most fans would, but these are things that happen, and TV rules the world. This is what happens when you do host G5s to open your year.
Well, what stinks about the Thursday night, though, I always defended it in past years because usually you had a marquee opponent that second game, right? Like, so you had that extra day or two to prepare, which I think was part of the motivation behind the move too, as far as agreeing to it. If you're the school like UCF New Hampshire, I'll be honest with you, that's probably an ESPN Plus game. The only thing that's weird about it, it's disappointing about this year is, you're following that up with Sam Houston. So do you really need an extra day or two for Sam Houston? But so to your point, Kyle, I agree. It's also, I would argue, 2 nice scrimmages to get ready before that Big 12 opener against TCU. You got 2 games to get all your kinks out before you go to Fort Worth at TCU, which I think is a key game because I think TCU is the unknown. We don't know what we're getting in TCU. They were in the national title game 2 years ago, and then they plummeted down to 5-7. Which TCU are we getting this year? Maybe something in between, or are we getting the mediocrity of TCU? We don't know. So that would be the kind of the interesting thought there. But I outside of West Virginia, I think this is a pretty good weather schedule. Would you not agree with that? That's the one that the only negative is West Virginia. But you had a feeling you were probably going to get West Virginia or Iowa State in November. You probably weren't going to be able to get both outside of November. So it stinks. That's the one negative that glaring is that trip at West Virginia in late November is going to be brutal, especially if West Virginia is as good as it turned out to be this past year.
I mean, it beats trying to do Colorado or some of these other locations or Iowa in that.
Yeah, West Virginia, Iowa State. I think I would rather be at West Virginia in November than Iowa State.
For all the frequent flyer miles that UCF got last year, it definitely feels like they were rendered some capitulation in this year's schedule. They're so much more favorable. And again, to your point, the only thing that might be problematic is West Virginia in November there too. But hey, listen, the argument could be made that you could take that you would take West Virginia over trying to go to Lubbock at this time last year, for example. So again, still elements of improvement compared to last year's traveling slate for sure. And a lot of big time games, to your point, as well throughout there, Eric Lopez. I'm sure we'll talk about that more as we go on.
Bryson, your thoughts on the schedule now that's out?
Well, I will say it's nice to not have back-to-back road games, and after that bye week against Tempe, it'll be good to have a bye week before traveling all the way up to Morgantown. So at least, even though you have concern about that Morgantown game, it's a good thing that UCF football has a bye week before that. I will say this, and I want to bring up the Big 12 release matrix because I find this interesting. Now, correct me if I'm seeing things, but UCF seems to is the only school to have their bye week 7 games between their bye week. That isn't bye weeks. That is an extremely long time between bye weeks to me. Like one kind of like UCF is in the second.
I would say that's ideal. I would say that's more than ideal, actually. That's I would imagine that's pretty normal across the board. Again, this is a leap year, so everybody's going to have 2 bye weeks. This is not unique to UCF. No, UCF didn't just find a loophole and get a second bye. Everybody's getting 2 byes.
Yes, yes, everybody's getting 2 byes, but like the thing is that we're seeing some schools like Kansas, for instance, has bye weeks within like only 2 games between theirs. You have
they're a basketball school. They don't know how to schedule bye weeks.
It seems the average is about 4 games, maybe 3, but Arizona is going to have 5, but UCF has 7. I mean, so honestly, if I'm going to look for games to watch for potential injuries in the sense of, wear and tear kind of injuries that could potentially really impact things, I'd look at those Arizona State games if I'm being honest with you, because once you're kind of late in those runs without like a week, if those wear and tear injuries are going to bite UCF at any point in time during the season, it's probably going to be there. That said, I think the biggest thing that people are going to take away from this is going to be that back-to-back Colorado and Florida. I mean, the good thing you have a bye week before that, am I right? Because that is going to be one where I would imagine UCF is going to get fairly solid. I don't know. Is Florida going to get good TV times this year, Eric?
They're in the SEC, Bryson. They're automatically going to get better time.
Well, but to Bryson's point, I mean, depending on how Florida starts, that game could be either really like an ESPN type of slot, or it could be an SEC network slot. Now, remember, this will be the first year where the SEC games can air on ABC. I'm not suggesting Florida UCF will be an ABC game, but it could. So yeah, I would agree with Kyle. I think it'll get a decent slot, whether it's a day game or night game. But I think it's going to depend on what kind of start they get. Remember, Florida opens with Miami, from what I remember on that schedule. I don't remember what they have prior to the UCF game. I think they have an SEC or 2 games before that. I could be wrong, but look, that's obviously from a UCF fan standpoint, that is an incredible back-to-back.
I mean, Eric, we can guarantee this. There are going to be 2 weeks back-to-back in the year where we will very highly likely not be on FS1 or 2.
Amen to that.
Well, Florida's schedule, by the way, they are going to be going on the road to Starkville, Mississippi to play the Bulldogs before hosting UCF.
Yeah. So, yeah, neither team gets a bye, so that's fair. I mean, this is life in the Power 5. You got to play these type of games back-to-back, so I don't have an issue with that. I do like – it's interesting that the bye weeks between TCU and Colorado, but I think that's fair. But, again, I would argue that New Hampshire and Sam Houston, to me, are de facto bye weeks. And I'm sorry. Yes, I am disrespecting those opponents. Those are easy wins. If they're not, then you're in for a long year. That's my point. So
to your point, Eric, those teams that try to make campaigns to make a big impact early in the year can backfire. Your Seminoles last year are a prime example. I like the part that there can be a little bit of hype built. Let's say the Gators do trend upward in a way none of us currently really expect at the moment who follow college football, right? Let's say they do surprise people. Then UCF gets them early with an opportunity to knock them off the perch. That'll make a lot of noise. Obviously, when you're in front of Colorado, that's going to be a big old hype number. If their improving is actually true, as it is alleged that Coach Prime has better recruited in the beef, in the trenches, should UCF win, become a Colorado fan immediately, because that too gives you the opportunity for hype. If you're looking for KJ Jefferson and company to be the best case scenario, as you hinted on blackandgoldbanneret.com, bing! Great article about KJ Jefferson's arrival, by the way, Lopez. If you're wanting those best case scenarios to all transpire, the fact that they are happening when they are is a big deal because at the end of the year, when UCF faces Utah on Black Friday, if everything is going particularly well and the best case scenario is taking place, they will be ranked higher, in my opinion, because of that hype. I'm not saying they're going to get a playoff spot necessarily, but it will certainly improve their bowl placement to where they won't be in the Gasparilla or something like that here.
Well, to your point, Colorado opens with North Dakota State at home, at Nebraska, at Colorado State, hosts Baylor. So that's actually that's manageable for them. You look at them after UCF, they have a bye week. Then they host Kansas State, at Arizona, host Cincinnati, bye week, at Texas Tech, Utah, at Kansas, Oklahoma State. Woo! Woo! That's rough. I mean, Dion might be applying for an NFL job by the time we get to Lawrence, Kansas. For my point. But to your point, Kyle, Colorado, that might look like a better game when it's play than it is in November. To your point, but it helps the hype machine, which is that's a great point to make. That from a hype standpoint, you're better off playing Colorado early because you know that TV eyeballs will be on that game. There's no question that game will get. I would be stunned and floored if that game doesn't get a good TV slot, considering it's Deion Sanders returning to the Sunshine State, where he became a name as one of the iconic college football players ever at Florida State, and went on to the NFL. That has to have a good slot. And both teams should have a good enough record to justify it.
100% accurate, Elo. I would also add to Bryson's point earlier about the 7 straight games. Well, that is a healthy amount of games strung together. I don't question that, Bryson. I think the last time we've seen some sort of a streak like that might be 2017. I'm saying off the hip, or 2018. I forget exactly.
You're talking about Hurricane Irma, right?
Right. That whole situation where their bye weeks got burned early and all that, and games were rescheduled. I think Austin P ended up getting involved to make it a string of consecutive games, et cetera, et cetera. Punchline's this, though. If you look at the games during that 7-game stretch, Bryson Turner, I think the commonality you'll notice is I don't feel like there's 2 tough games back to back, at least based on the reputation of the teams such as they are. The argument could be made that BYU and followed by Arizona is a tough pairing back to back, arguably the toughest on the schedule as far as one game following another. I think that's a fair point, but at day's end, I don't really feel like I see 2 giants back to back like you saw in some instances in UCF schedule last year. Once again, they were given a number of, how you say, graces after suffering the 2023 schedule.
Well, I think they got the rookie treatment, right, the first year, and now you're like a regular, so you get more.
I feel like the toughness.
You can't get their flyer miles, Eric.
if you wanted to look at the 2 toughest games back to back, and I mean back to back as in back to back weeks. I actually think it might. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on that, Kyle. I actually think it's the last 2 games, going to Morgantown to play West Virginia and then hosting Utah, who we have to imagine is a Big 12 title contender at that point for Black Friday. And if the Big 12 title race or the spots to get into the Big 12 championship game is coming down to the wire at that point, then the Bounce House could be hosting a pretty important football game for Big 12's championship implications.
That's more about the scheduling than it is the programs, Bryson. And hey, listen, I'll give you enough credit. If you can have that much faith in West Virginia, I am more than happy to give you.
I don't have faith. I don't have faith in West Virginia. I have faith in Morgantown being a hard place to play.
I actually agree with Bryson on that. We're at West Virginia late November. I mean, the weather ain't going to be pleasant. And then Utah, by the way, in a short week, you get Utah in a short week. Utah's a physical brand with Kyle Whittingham as the head coach. If Cam Rising's healthy, their quarterback, they're a contender for the Big 12 title. So that is a tough finish, but at the same time, you gotta, when you're a Power 5 school, when you're playing a Power 5 conference, you're not going to be able to duck for a long time.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, the only pushback I would offer is I'm here being told that Cincinnati is this minor league team, according to Eric Lopez.
I mean, how many players have we gotten from their team this offseason?
Right, the farm system team. Yeah. Meanwhile, we want to talk about traveling, and you're all in my mug about Morgantown. They would have already made a longer trip to Tempe at that point. So really, Morgantown, who cares? You know, it might be maybe, I don't know.
Well, a good point here, Kyle, right? We're not going to hear about, man, we're traveling so much. Oh, we're traveling. Oh, woe is us. We're traveling on charter everywhere. Oh.
You know, I will say, speaking of traveling, UCF fans who are out of state, I mean, if there are two games that we knew based off opponent alone that everybody wanted to go, that everybody would want to go see, it's Colorado and Florida, and they're back to back. So I don't know who will go to both of those games that isn't local, but I think those are going to be the two. Those are going to be two like week-long stay. I could see some UCF fans just making like week-long stays at this point to see both games. I mean, like, of all the games to be back-to-back, I think Colorado and Florida was one that I honestly was not expecting to be back-to-back, if I'm being honest.
I think people commenting on the chat, thank you for coming up this morning. Stephen Holman, talking about the cold game at West Virginia. Well, 32 saying Arizona being a space game. That's not official, is it?
Yes, it is. It is? UCF released a press release on the 2024 football schedule, and they have revealed the theme nights for the home games. So we have BYU is going to be the homecoming game, followed by Arizona for the space game. Ooh. Eric, I know you're pretty high on you were pretty high on Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, prior to Jed Fish leaving, I made them the favorites for the Big 12, and so did the odds makers with their quarterback. If you know, they had a really, really good team. Obviously, Jed Fish has left. They hired Brennan from San Jose State. So to me, it kind of, you might remember this. Arizona is kind of like UCF in 2018 in that they returned a lot of talent from a really good team the year before, but the big question is the head coach. You know, Josh Heupel had just taken over, so a lot of people were skeptical. What does it mean for UCF? Remember, UCF fans got mad because they were ranked lower because of the coaching change. Arizona kind of fills that bill, and so I don't know what to expect because they're with Brennan taking over for Jed Fish. I think if Jed Fish was there, yes, Arizona would be the favorites. Now there's a bit of an open question there.
Still going to be a tough game for UCF.
No doubt. Yes.
I listen, I'm going to go and make this statement at this point way too early. I reserve the right to change it when we do any sort of preview action on the Night Shift podcast. Bing! But right now, I'm not feeling so hot about the undefeated streak for the space game if Arizona is the opponent.
Oh, that's a great point. Like, I'm trying to think, is that the best? Could be on paper, maybe the best team they've played in a space game. I know people are going to bring up Oklahoma State last year, but Arizona, if Brennan does a good job as a head coach, and we don't know because we don't know. But if he does, you're right. Arizona on paper should be better than Oklahoma State last year. So I actually agree with that. But we don't know. We got to see how they fare in the transition there from going from Jed Fish to Brennan. But that's interesting. That's a good point. And plus, I like Arizona's road jerseys personally. So that's kind of fun. And I'm hoping that we'll see what I'm curious too. How many Arizona fans come down to Orlando? I think that's going to be interesting because how big. I mean, we talked about this when the original opponent schedule came out months ago. All these West Coast teams, Kyle, it has a Pac-12-esque feel to the schedule a little bit, right? With Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, like. I feel like we're kind of Big 12, but we're also in the Pac-12. I know we're Pac-12 is dead at this point, but it's just kind of a westerly schedule. But UCF Bent lucked out in that they only have to travel to Tempe this year, which is why I think, Kyle, is Gus Malzahn's one of the many reasons he's all in this year. You know, there's no guarantees you're going to get this favorable of a travel schedule moving forward down the road in the Big 12.
Oh, yeah, and that's not just for Big 12 teams in general. I mean, look at the state of college football and how regions are basically becoming obliterated, Eric Lopez. Nobody may have this favorable a travel schedule ever again. I say it with hyperbole, of course. But, yeah, travel is a lot heavier a part of the game than it has been ever before because of the fact that conferences in some cases are trying to go coast to coast.
I honestly, I think if there's any school that I feel like is going to be like cheated, like has the worst travel of any in the Big 12, Kansas State going from Colorado to West Virginia, just from like a place to play type of thing is oof. I mean, just looking at the different types of schedules, I feel like that maybe the UCF schedule could have been better, but I also would really take this. You know what I mean? Like,
is this the part where I go all Eric Lopez and be all like, "But this is is this a UCF schedule release program, Bryson? What are you doing here?"
well, it's more of like you definitely take this because you don't have back-to-back road, you don't have back-to-back weeks on the road. You don't have to do that. You have the ones you are on the road. I feel like you can beat, at least from what our previews so far, and the toughness factor could really come from the road environment. We don't. I think it was Stephen Holman that said it. It looks like Iowa State is going to be the only cold game. Maybe West Virginia could be cold as well, being in November, but Ames, Iowa being when it is, okay. And we have we have a lot of the pack. Then of course we have the back-to-back weeks against Arizona. So we have a lot of the Pac-12 schools later in the season, 3 of the 4.
Yeah. So my question, Kyle, is when are you booking your flight for Jerry's World? Because we're going, baby. Big 12 title game. Book it. Let's go.
Listen,
let's go.
I did read your article on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. Bing! And listen, I'll put it this way. I will have talks with the wife to put it on the calendar to make that trip.
Have you ever been to Jerry's World?
I have not.
Really? Yet. Oh, I mean, neither have I, but you're an NFL guy, so I was curious if at some point you cross paths.
Oh, it's on the list. Listen, I have every intention of
I'm going to tell you, this might be UCF's best chance ever to get to Jerry's World.
It might be.
I really do. With the schedule, the way it's set up, with the group that you have, comparing to some of the other contenders, this is why I think Gus made all these coaching changes to some extent, Kyle, because, well, first of all, he clearly listens to the night shift shows or Black and Go Better. I thought it was glaring, Kyle. You were not on the pod last week. Me and Jeff kind of discussed about last season being a disappointment. Well, Gus took it a different level and called it, quote, unacceptable. Yeah. That was Bryson's question to Gus. And Bryson's like, what do you consider it unacceptable? Because that was a 6 and 7 year.
Well, some of the players, I think it was RJ Harvey, said it was embarrassing. Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow. Is that what RJ really said? Wow.
Watch it. Yeah, you can go watch it on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel.
Good plug. Kai, I know you got to go. So you let me know when you got to go, because I know you got a hard you have a life. So.
Yeah, I will say this to kind of finalize my 2 cents.
Yes.
Just with no disrespect to Bryson, because I know you're analyzing and nitpicking. That's the job of we media folk on the show. But honestly, beyond the Thursday night opener, fans complaining about this schedule, I just don't get it. Like this.
Who's complaining? Well, somebody's always going to complain.
That's my point exactly. For the inevitable complaint from the fan, short for fanatic, right? For the inevitable complaint that's coming in that situation, you're just foundless in logic at this point. I don't have time for you if you don't like this. And keep listening. Throw tomatoes at me. My social medias at the SOTG on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram. But at the end of the day, you could tell UCF put in their licks to have a good say for this year's schedule.
All right, Kyle, we're going to let you go because you got to go. Check out Kyle's breakdown of the schedule. It'll be on blackandgoldbanneret.com. It's on there. He'll hopefully, cross those fingers, maybe he'll be on with us during the pod later this week. We'll have a more extensive. I do, though. I'm going to tell you this right now. This is UCF's best chance to get to the Big 12 title game. Might be the best chance they get this decade. And that's because of the way the schedules play out. The odds of them having a schedule like this with as many home games, not as much travel, an experienced quarterback, at least in the Gus Malzahn era.
At the very least, Eric Lopez, this year could put UCF in a position to get Gus Malzahn to continue recruiting and breaking records.
No doubt.
To get that high reputation out there and put up at least a good fight to have a better opportunity to get to that championship game that you're talking about. But for right now, I'm not mad at your statement. The line as far as the schedule would be set here for opportunities. Hopefully health and the football gods keep along with UCF this year on the football field. But gentlemen, thank you for having me in. Thank you for all in the comments who are doing the thing. Biggest complaint, having to wait 200 days is perfectly legit. Eric Edwards, I'm with you on that. But until next time, everyone, class dismissed.
All right, that's Kyle Nash. All right, Bryson, we're going to stay a little longer because we got a lot good audience here. So we're going to stay a little longer with more reactions. By the way, the spring game has also been announced, Bryson. Why don't you tell the audience about the spring game? We're going to stay a little bit longer. We're going to probably stay another 15, 20 minutes. But give me spring game also been announced. So
yes.
We don't have to wait. Technically, you don't have to wait 200 days, but you really do.
Yeah, the spring game is going to be on UCF Football posted it on their Twitter account about an hour ago. The spring game has now been scheduled for April 12th at 7 p.m. And the good news is, if you're a fan of UCF's stickball, they are going to be on the road that weekend. So if you want to come on campus to see UCF, you don't have to worry about any other sport traffic. Now, Eric, I do actually have a question for you. Of the non-UCF Big 12 title contenders, how do you feel about how they're spread out on this schedule from the non-UCF Big 12 title contenders that UCF has on their schedule?
Well, I have to study that a little closer. I think the better question is, how many wins do you think they can get, Bryson? Looking at the schedule, first glance, I think 9-10 wins is realistic for UCF.
I think 9-10 wins is definitely possible.
I agree. Now, I agree with you. I think
a world where it would. I could see a world where it would.
I agree with you. I think West Virginia, late November, I could see that being a loss. That is a tricky place to play. Now, West Virginia had a surprisingly good year last year. Can they duplicate that a second year in a row? Then they host Utah in a short week. I could see a split at best case scenario there. They could go, 0-2. I don't know. Maybe split. Maybe the Florida game, I think it's going to be fast. And TCU in Florida will set the tone in a lot of ways. At TCU is kind of an unknown game there, Fort Worth, but I don't think that's a tough place to play. Gainesville is. But we don't know what the mood in Gainesville is going to be at that point. You would know this better than anybody. That crowd could be really behind Florida early, but if they get off to a bad start, they'll turn on that Florida team. So it's the possibilities are endless from a scheduling standpoint. And I think you'll have to break down the other contenders to see what their schedule looks like in comparison. But I tell you what, I find it hard to believe that anybody has a better favorable schedule than UCF, considering travel, considering everything that's in play.
Well, let me see. Utah, the lead up to Utah being because you mentioned with Utah being a possibility on getting into the Big 12 title game. And
Utah here, for example, Utah's got to host Baylor. They're at Oklahoma State, at Stillwater, host Arizona. So they got Oak State, Arizona back-to-back before a bye. They're at Arizona State, host TCU, at Houston, bye, host BYU, they're at UCF to finish, to host Iowa State, and they're at Colorado. That's a tricky spot for Utah. How does Utah adjust to this new schedule for them? This is year one for them. We don't know. Oklahoma State opens at home against Arkansas. Which is interesting, non-conference. They open the conference hosting Utah. That's a big game. Oklahoma State, Utah. That is a heavyweight battle for the opener for the Big 12 for both of those teams.
You look at the three legacy Big 12 programs that UCF doesn't play this year: Kansas State, and Oklahoma State, which I think all three of them could be in conversation for being in the Big 12 title. But this is very interesting, Eric. All three of them have their final regular season games on the road, and not while UCF does not. I feel like back-to-back flights is kind of a little bit of a disadvantage. It's not a killer. definitely not a killer, but it is certainly not ideal. And so for UCF to finish their season at home against against a Big 12 title, possible Big 12 title contender in Utah, but when you look at the other possibilities for Big 12 title contenders like Kansas State, and Oklahoma State, getting a chance to be at home before potentially going to Jerry's World if you get there certainly is let's just say a nice little cookie from the schedulers right there.
By the way, I got to correct myself. So Brett McMurphy, credit to him. Utah Baylor game technically this year is not a conference game. That is a non-conference game that was previously scheduled. So that is not a conference game. So be careful. There's there's two of those games actually. That
I'm sure somebody is going to make that mistake. I'm sure somebody will.
Oh, well, I mean, we're all going to make these mistakes with these conference realignment changes constantly going on.
Yeah, then we got to remember and then we got to remember, like, the Oregon State, Washington State games aren't going to count for the Mountain West people, and that's a whole thing. This is going to be very fun because now that the season, with the season being over, college football, there were changes, sure, but like 2023 was like the prelude for what the rest of these for this season, which is when from a fan perspective and affiliation perspective is when things go completely out of whack, and when things are the landscape from just a aesthetic perspective is completely changed now with all this Pac-12 and ACC and now the new Big 12.
So, by the way, here's so Brett McMurphy, the credit to him on this. Baylor at Utah, September 7th. Arizona at Kansas State, September 14th, will be non-conference games. They will not be Big 12 games because these were previously scheduled contracts. These were games that were scheduled in advance. If you remember, Baylor and Utah played last year in Waco, so they just couldn't, they decided not to get rid of the game. So that's interesting to keep that in mind. So Baylor, Utah, Arizona, Kansas State technically have an extra Big 12 game, even though it's not a Big 12 game. That could be a negative from a win-loss standpoint, could be a positive from a schedule strength. Who knows? That's interesting to see how that will play out. Another note that Brett McMurphy made that it's interesting, you mentioned Kansas, Bryson, a team that a lot of people like. One of the reasons I don't, Kansas this year will be playing off campus for their home games due to construction to their stadium. In fact, Kansas will play. Yeah, Kansas, they're constructing their stadium at football. So they're going to play their home games against Linderwood and UNLV will be at Children's Mercy Park, which is the home of the MLS Sporting KC. They're going to play at MLS Stadium for a couple of their home games. And then their other home games against TCU, Houston, Iowa State, and Colorado will be in Arrowhead Stadium, home of the Kansas City Chiefs.
I mean, why can't they be more like Vanderbilt and play in the stadium while it's under construction? Arrowhead, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie.
Why couldn't that have happened last year, man? Can you imagine if UCF Kansas was in Arrowhead? I think that would have drawn more people to travel. I really do.
Man, yeah, it definitely would be. I would totally agree with that. I'm going to be very jealous of TCU of Colorado fans and TCU fans and all and Houston fans that will get to experience that in. Well, no, we shouldn't. We shouldn't be too. What's the word? Disappointed because UCF got to play in an NFL stadium like every other year for a while with Raymond James. So, I mean, I guess UCF has, I guess, sure, UCF could have used that experience very well had we gotten the opportunity. But it's certainly, it's not to say like, oh, we never get to play in an NFL stadium, which, I mean, we have. It's just, a different one.
By the way, to your point, Bryson, UCF, that 7-game stretch is the longest among any of the Big 12 teams. There are 7 teams that have a 6-game stretch. And then Iowa State, Arizona State each end with a 5-game stretch consecutively.
So, yeah. So that type of thing is, like I said, it's just where I think injuries, like the wear and tear type, could really bite you. And that's why I'm really looking at those Arizona games in particular, because Arizona, if they end up come up good with a new head coach and that young quarterback you've been touting, what was his name again?
Fertitta, yeah, Fertitta.
Yes. So
Noah Fertitta.
If
McMillan, a great receiver, yeah.
Yeah, if they come up good, then you definitely want to be going in on all cylinders, going in on Arizona, but it's going to be coming ahead of a 7-game stretch. And, what Kyle said about Irma is valid. UCF has handled very long stretches before, but it's definitely not something you'd want to do again. Like, it's a good story and all that, but doing these types of things, like it puts yourself in a situation for something to happen. And then you follow that up with the flying to I think it's the mountain I think it's the mountain time zone. Is Arizona State in?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So they got to fly to the mountain to the mountain time zone to play Arizona State, which I feel like is more of a tough place to play just because of the jet lag that could potentially come with that. And it's a game where I feel like if UCF can almost beat themselves, almost in a sense in that game, So like oh man, what was it? At least we only got to do it once. So that's it. So that's a good sign right there. Has UCF ever played in the Mountain Time Zone, or has it been a while?
Yeah. They played at Arizona State way back in the day. We're talking like independent days when Mike Cruz was the coach and they got blown out by Arizona State. That's been it. They played at Provo against BYU, but that's my point. This is why I think this is a favorable schedule. You don't have to make multiple trips out west. Remember last year how many times you had to go to Kansas, for example? I think this is a favorable schedule. Look, I do think they're a playoff conference title contender. I think they can get to the conference title game. I think they can get to Jerry's World. Look at the Big 12 this past year. Oklahoma State got there. They were not a great team. We would know. We beat the bleep out of them. Mm-hmm. So, to me, it's set up to win 9-10 games, get to Jerry's World. I don't know if they win Jerry's World, the ultimate Big 12 title game. I'm not saying that, but I do think they can contend. I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation, Kyle, and I think Gus Malzahn would be the first to tell you that.
I think they expect to, but I think they're going to always treat it as a one game at a time.
Well, that's coach cliche, absolutely.
So looking at the schedule now, I think the Big 12, the contenders still seem to be fairly consistent with what is more like what it is before. Kansas State, I will say that it'll be that the last week of September, month of October for Kansas State is going to be particularly interesting since they got to play Oklahoma State, go to Colorado, go to Morgantown, host Kansas. That's going to end up being a very key stretch for their Big 12 chances because they're gonna have to come up good in that week. Kansas, I actually, if you want to look at like just a favorable scheduling perspective, I kind of like Kansas's schedule. I think the way that Kansas's schedule is kind of spread out, I could see them potentially coming up good.
I don't like the fact they're playing off camp. I don't know. I don't like them playing off campus. I mean, I think that's going to be interesting. How many people will actually support
you really think playing off campus is going to be that much of a difference for them?
I'm curious to see how many other fans will come and go watch them play. Maybe at Arrowhead. I think that makes sense. I don't know about the games at the MLS stadium, but I mean, look, Kansas, you're right. On paper, if Daniels is healthy at quarterback, Kansas will be in the mix. You're absolutely correct. I will not dispute that. I think you look at the contenders. I think Arizona, what they have on the roster, Brennan's the coach is the question there. You also have a situation. I think Utah has to be in the conversation. I think Oklahoma State's also in the conversation with Ollie Gordon and company. I think they're in the mix. I think you're right, Bryson. There's a handful of teams that are certainly in the mix, but I think UCF has to be in that conversation. They're in the top 4 or 5. How can they not, considering what they have, especially on this offense, which I think is the best offense in the Gus Malzahn era to date, with KJ, at quarterback, with RJ at the backfield, with the receivers, the offensive line. I think it's going to be very interesting. So
Yeah, there are going to be some interesting cases to be made with some people early on. Actually, the good news is we might actually see West Virginia kind of determine who they are this year a little bit early on, considering before their first bye week they host Penn State, and then their first conference game is hosting Kansas. So we might actually get a pretty good grip on the type of West Virginia that we might play early on, which I think is definitely something that is good to have. Definitely more film to work with for that game. By contrasting with that, UCF with Colorado is not going to have that much. I honestly think the one thing you want to make sure you do with Colorado is scout, just because of the talent that they bring in. And so the bad news about that is that you only have 4 weeks of film to look at for this Colorado team. The good news, though, is that you at least have an extra week when you're not playing to specifically prepare.
Well, the tough part is you're going to face Shakur Sanders healthy more than likely early. Whereas, remember last year, Shakur Sanders got beat up because of that offensive line. They just didn't have a good offensive line. And as the year went on, he got beat up and Colorado dipped. That shouldn't happen this year. I think Shakur Sanders should be healthy. I think, Travis Hunter and company. I mean, that is going to be an amazing hype game from that standpoint. We'll see.
You flip that around though, and you could potentially see, if say Fertitta would run into an issue, then Arizona being late in the season, that could potentially. I don't know. You can't really predict injuries, so.
All I know is it's going to be, as a fan, you got to be excited. You get Colorado. I mean, from a season ticket, you got Colorado with Deion Sanders coming in. You've got
the Florida trip,
the Florida road game, which I think UCF fans will try to get as much road tickets as you can for that game. That will be a big demand. You host Arizona, you host Utah on a Black Friday. Like I said, it's the most quality opponent. First time UCF's played a quality opponent on a Black Friday in 7 years, 10 years?
UCF BYU could certainly be a nice little interesting game just to kind of get a revenge.
BYU brings a good fan base too. They bring fans. If I remember, in fact, it was 10 years ago, ironically enough, UCF hosted BYU in a double overtime classic. Terrence Plummer, I remember him. He was exhausted outside and everything. It's a good, outside the first 2 home games, which are scrimmages. It's a very attractive home slate.
No, yeah, it's a nice, UCF BYU is going to say could be an opportunity for revenge from the Boca Raton Bowl potentially. Like people. Well, look, I mean, BYU won that game 49-23, and people that were.
I'm not Kyle and Jeff. I could give a bleep about exhibition games like Boca Raton Bowl. I remember we did a live show and Brian Murphy was covering the Boca Raton Bowl, and he didn't give a bleep. Half of the UCF roster didn't care about that game. So I mean, you saw how that actually was the game that got Zach Wilson up to the number 2 draft pick and basically ruined, the Jets kind
of. Oh boy!
Right. All right, let's start wrapping this up. And kind of give some final thoughts here, because I know there's a lot still to go on. We're going to have more on this developing story now. It's official. The schedule, you can start planning. You can start booking hotels. Let me ask you that, Bryson. As a fan, what trip would you – forget Florida. We've already talked Florida ad nauseum, obviously. Take Florida aside. Which other road game gets you excited?
Honestly, even though I think it's the one that we're most likely to lose, I feel like West Virginia, because say what you will, but it is a very cool place to watch a college football game. And I feel like that if UCF had a large contingent of away supporters there, that could certainly help at least try to mitigate that place to play factor that Morgantown has. Plus, to hear Country Roads get sang live, like I don't care if people mock it. It's a great song on its own, and so to hear that live would certainly be an experience that I would not mind doing in the slightest. TCU, though, I will admit, just from a travel perspective, I think it's also
Fort
very
Worth,
good.
the Fort Worth area with Dallas,
Dallas Fort Worth would be very interesting, and you know what? Once the Dallas schedules drop, you could make if they're home that year, the Cowboys, you can make that a double header.
Well, you could do, and see, that's why I think from a traveling standpoint for the fan base, I think you look at TCU and Arizona State, because Arizona State, you could do the same thing depending on what the Arizona Cardinals schedule is that weekend. Plus, in November, at that point, you have the NBA with the Phoenix Suns as a possibility. Maybe the Coyotes in the National Hockey League. Apparently, they have an intimate arena in hockey.
Yeah, are they still playing on that campus?
But you're right, Fort Worth, Dallas. I would, if I had to bet, not counting Florida, okay, not counting the Gator game, I would say TCU is the other most will be the most travel where the most UCF fans will travel. As far as you'll have the most UCF fans at a road game will probably be TCU because that's an easy flight, right? Yeah. Orlando to Dallas is easy to get to Fort Worth. I would say Tempe in November, especially if you're a golf fan. I mean, there's some great, beautiful golf courses in Tempe. I think people will take advantage of that. So therefore, I'm not sure people are going to be like going out of their way to book a flight for Morgantown, West Virginia, which first of all, it's not going to be easy to get there. In fact, I could see more UCF fans driving to Morgantown versus flying. Take the long drive. Do you buy that? I could see that.
Well, the thing is that I feel like that. I mean, the good news is about having Florida as an away game on this schedule is that conceivably a UCF fan could actually go to 2 away games potentially, because you save on travel costs a little bit driving up to Florida, so you could potentially go to 2 games. Now, if they're TCU and Florida, that would be kind of close together there, and you'd be going to 3 straight games. So it could be interesting to see if some do the back to back. I'm thinking more of like a general casual fan. Diehards are definitely gonna do that, I'm sure, but I'm talking more about the general casual UCF fan. And TCU and Florida definitely kind of fit that bill the most, I think. I think West Virginia honestly makes a lot of sense just from like a college football purist or a college football or like a relatively like all college football fan, like because West Virginia being the tradition that it is. So I honestly think that if I had to look at this schedule and say, all right, Bryson, find the trap game on this schedule. Like a that type of thing, like a Baylor, that type of thing. I would honestly look at Iowa State. I mean, with it being probably a cold game and going to Ames, Iowa, I think if there's any game on this schedule to me that looks like it could be a trap, Admiral Akbar at the moment.
Sure, right. Matt Campbell does a good job as a head coach. Usually Iowa State turns, by October starts to figure things out at Ames, Iowa. You're right. 2 tricky road games there. You're right. That's a tricky road game that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I don't know how many UCF fans are going to go out of their way to go to Ames, Iowa either. So you're right.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one.
It will be interesting because, like, remember, a lot of UCF people will have already gone to one away game.
Well, so let me ask you this. If I told you right now, UCF at Iowa State at West Virginia, I give you a split. Would you take it right now? If I said, hey, would you want to take a split? You take 2 games. I don't know which one you win, which one you lose, but overall, at the start of the year, would you take a split of those 2 road games? I think I would. I think I would, right? I feel like I would.
Yes, I think I would too, especially if they come up, especially if both schools or one of the schools come up good, because
and odds are one of them will probably be good, if not both. I mean, Matt Campbell has a good track record. Look at last year; they got off to a bad start, and then really turned it on. He's a good developer, really good X's and O's coach, really good.
Yeah, like see the Super Bowl.
And then look at West Virginia. Obviously, they won 9 games last year, so I think that's a factor. So you're right. It's a tricky games. TCU is kind of tricky only because we don't know. They're kind of the unknown, but I'm not scared of Sonny Dykes coach teams. I can tell you that.
Yeah, we got experience with that. Yeah.
Home games. Give me the student experience. Rate the home games. Obviously Sam Houston, New Hampshire at the bottom. Give me the rank me the home games. The most exciting to least exciting.
Well, the most exciting is going to be Colorado for sure. I just you just know that student section is going to be packed. That now we'll see if it's for the entire game. It is going to be. I mean, I don't know though. If they ever wanted to do another fans on the field after a win, that would be a really good one to do it. If Colorado comes up good, then that could be a fun opportunity for fans on the field. But the second opportunity, I think, and that depends on the fortunes that each team's kind of go through, though, and my number 2 pick is Utah, because it does involve some conditions. Colorado, I think, is going to be crowded, is going to be packed no matter what. But
that's the one that casual people are going to be fascinated by, intrigued.
Exactly.
I mean, it's delicious. Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Utah is going to be dependent on how the season has gone to this point. If UCF is in contention for the Big 12 title, if both UCF and Utah are Big 12 title contenders, then that is going to be packed, and the bounce house is probably going to register on the Richter scale.
We'll probably get a good TV slot too. The fact that it's a Black Friday game, I think the conference is banking on that game being pretty relevant. So as a result, you might get a broadcast channel out of that, maybe an ABC or a Fox type of deal from there. If both teams, to your point, are doing well, and let's say they both have like 9 wins going into that could be fun. Number 2, I agree with you. I think Utah is probably number 2 if I had to rank it. I think Arizona, even though I think Arizona is really good, I don't know if Arizona is going to register with the casuals as it does with the diehards. Arizona is more of a known as if they're good.
It's late enough in the season where Arizona can build a reputation.
But I think to your point, though, it's a wait and see game. Whereas Colorado is going to draw no matter what. I think Utah, you're right to your point, will probably draw more regardless. And then BYU is interesting. BYU will bring good fan base. In fact, I would not be surprised if BYU probably brings the most visiting fans among all the teams that are coming here. I would predict BYU would bring the most visiting fans. So
I can see that. Actually, a lot of I think all of UCF's home games, conference home games, barring Cincinnati, are coming from the Mountain Time Zone, I think.
Yes, correct. So, yes, which is, again, that's why this is a big benefit. What are the odds that you just draw all those teams from the West Coast to come to your place, and it's not a mixture of you traveling there and then traveling here? I think that's a big benefit, and I think UCF's got to take advantage of this schedule. You may not get this schedule the rest of your decade in the Big 12. I mean, the odds of this schedule playing out like this with its very few travel. Obviously, it's a year where UCF has 5 conference home games versus 4. You have to put that into the equation. It's a favorable schedule from that standpoint. Not saying it's a gimme. I don't believe they're going undefeated, but and as we're going to wrap this up, Bryson, because we do have other commitments we got to commit to. 9-10 wins, not out of the question. Not out of the question. I think that's a fair expectation. And I think that's the internal expectation. You saw that at the press conference. That was incredible with Gus. And I love the honesty, man. I loved it. I love the fact that Gus was just said unacceptable, man. That fired me up. And I think that's a motivation behind some of these changes on the staff. Whether it works or not, who knows? But I think if you're a UCF fan, you got to like that the coach is kind of saying, you know what? I agree with you. Last year wasn't acceptable. We want to win. We want to win big. And I think that's what this year is going to be about.
That's that SEC attitude right there, which is definitely interesting, considering that we now have the legacy Big 12 programs and Pac-12 programs coming into play this. And yeah, I think 9-10 wins. I mean, you're going to have to do that in order to be a Big 12 contender. I mean, honestly, if I had to choose games that seem like the most likely losses right now, Iowa State is probably one.
I'm going to say either Iowa State or West Virginia. One of those two is a loss.
Yeah. Look, actually, Iowa State, West Virginia, Utah. I could see UCF splitting the last 2 weeks. I think so. If I had to guess, what the losses would be. I actually think Iowa State, West Virginia, and Utah. If you're going 9-3, I think those could be the three. That because I'm saying now, I did mention that that you want to split the 2 away games with Iowa State and West Virginia, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen.
No, I agree.
So you have the split. If you're looking at a home game, I'm thinking there's another home game though. Arizona, that's going to be one to really watch.
Colorado early, I think, is dangerous. I think
early Colorado.
I think Colorado will be really ready early in the year. I think any flaws they have don't get exposed till later in the year. Like, I think it would have been an easier game for UCF if they played them in November. I agree with you. I think Arizona's the tougher game over Colorado.
Look, the thing is,
Florida's a big game, by the way. They have to win the Florida game. I think the Florida game.
It's not to impact the conference standings. It's more about pride than anything.
Well, and you got to get off to a good start. Like I said, you only leave the state once between opening night and October 12th. You got to take advantage of that. You got to get off to a fast start. So I think that'll dictate too how many wins, and that creates momentum too. So
right I mean, look, I'm really glad that the program definitely has expectations for a 9-3 season.
And they should.
I honestly think that that coming in to this year, because we know the Big 12 is going to be hard. We knew that, but at the same time, I think that the possibilities, like if we want to look at possibilities and not expectations, I think UCF has such a wider range of possibilities in the Big 12 than they ever had before. Like in the American, like you knew that it was going to be a 9-10, a 9-10 win season. You kind of knew that when UCF was good anyway. In the Big 12 though, last year's team was still pretty good, but they still went 6-7 and 6-7. While this one, you like you said, Colorado is certainly difficult. The Swamp is a big environment to play in. Iowa State, Arizona State, West Virginia on the road, Utah. I mean, these are 6 games that certainly bring with them some kind of thing that could result in being in a loss. So just as much as UCF could go 9-3 or something like that, UCF could also easily go 6-6 again.
But that would be. I think people would be disappointed. I think Gus and the staff would be disappointed. And here's the thing: even if you think that's a tough schedule, it's nothing compared to, for example, what Florida is going to go through in the SEC and other SEC teams are going through. It's nothing compared. To that.
But it's a disappointment. It would be a disappointment because of just the talent that you have on the roster. Because
in the quarterback again, it goes back. You get a KJ Jefferson for 1 year. You got to take advantage.
I mean, the reason they got KJ Jefferson though is because they know that this is their last year with certain high-end talent
on offense in particular.
The high-end talent that have been around a while, and it's a very experienced team. And even in the American, they were very good talent in the American, and so this is their last chance to work with these people. And then after that, it's going to be mostly a pretty hard reset, and you're going to have to kind of build that chemistry back up again. And that's going to take a lot of time, which is why Gus went after KJ because this is their chance to win right now. I think there's a better chance that UCF could get a Big 12 title game this year than they have in 2025, 2026, maybe even 2027. Who knows? But so this is where you just put the chips now and see what happens and see what happens. And they want to win. They're a team that really wants to win. That's that SEC attitude. And I'm very interested because this basically is now, if you want to throw an SEC attitude in there, that's a big difference between UCF as a program and all the others, because you have the former Pac-12 programs, you have the legacy Big 12 programs, and then you have UCF with this head coach with kind of an SEC mindset to it, which adds a third conference kind of mindset into the mix in this one, college football in 2024. Everybody, it's going to be a fun ride.
It's a wacky ride. All right, we're going to do it. We're going to wrap it up there. We'll have more on this story as the days go by. There's an article on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Kyle wrote a breakdown of the schedule. To check that out. I'm sure we'll have more on the Night Shift podcast in the coming days and weeks. Lots of UCF stuff going on. UCF basketball obviously going on. Men's hoops going, hosting Baylor Wednesday night. I'll be there with Nick, I would assume. I think are you there too, Bryson? Are you there?
If I'm going to be going, I believe if I remember right, you want to go, you're going to that game if I'm not mistaken.
I got to get my basketball fix in before softball starts.
Yeah, so if you
disappear.
Yeah, if you and Nick are going to be going and covering the game, I'll probably do what I did during the Kansas game, and I'll probably be in the student section, I think.
There you go. We'll figure it out, folks. We got you all covered. Follow us on all the social media platforms for Black and Gold Banneret, and certainly go to blackandgoldbanneret.com, and, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You got lots of videos up, all the football media availabilities, post-game press conferences. We were just at UCF Softball Media Day. Videos being released about that. We're going to have all of that and much more as you're getting a busy time here at UCF. Thanks to Kyle Nash for joining us earlier in the show. Thank you, Bryson, for showing up on the show. Thank you to all of you that have watched this special here as we break down and react live to the UCF football schedule. 2024 is officially out. Start making your plans. Should be a fun year. Until next time, Eric Lopez saying so long. You've been watching Night Shift. Good night. Charge on.